organising this, and Emma and the team for treating us all to dinner, which has been awesome so far. And thank you, Tony and Josh, for bringing me to Melbourne to do the talk that I gave this morning. I'm going to try and do like the really impressive thing of just like talking. I've like just committed something to memory, which is either going to go really well and you're going to be really impressed, or I'm going to forget halfway through and just need to start talking about my kids. So the talk that I gave this morning was a talk based on about the book that I've most recently written called Future Demand, and the book's based on a really simple concept that in any market there are two types of demand. There's what I call existing demand, which is people who are in the market, in the category today, wanting to buy something. And there's what I call future demand, which is people who aren't in the category at the moment looking to buy something, but they will come into the category at some point in future. And so to relate this to yourselves, I'm sure that most of you probably have a period of a month or two once every few years where you replace your car and you're in the market for a new car, or at least a better car than the one that you've got. So your kind of existing demand in the car category for a small amount of time, every 5 years or so, and for a much larger amount of time, your future demand. You're not looking to buy a new car, but you will definitely be at some point in the future. Through that period of the last 15 years, we've established principles and popularized principles like excess share of voice, right? How we can calculate the amount of money we ought to be spending if we want to drive market share gains. Like penetration over loyalty, the fact that marketing and advertising is much better at bringing in new customers and growing penetration than it is talking to small groups of existing customers and creating loyalty outcomes. Like the work in the long and short of it, that there are different effects that happen over the short term and the long term from marketing, and there are different types of activities that drive those effects. Or like the related work of Ehrenberg Bass, mental availability and physical availability. Basically, long and short and mental availability and physical availability are the same idea. They're the same principle, that we've got one job, which is to build mental availability, familiarity of our brand among a big group of people. We've got another job, which is to make things easy to understand and find and buy when people come into the market. So those two concepts, even though they come from different places, are essentially the same thing. And then let's not forget about distinctive assets and what we know about how they help to build the compounding value of a brand over time. So we've got these principles, and these principles are robust principles. And what I mean by robust principles is they have been observed across different data sets, analysed by different groups of people in different places at different times. So all of these principles, they're not the result of sort of one study. They're the result of finding these patterns across Ehrenberg Bass's data set, which is very different to Kantar's data set, which is very different to the IPA's data set. We find these same principles, these same patterns occurring across all of those data sets. And that's how we know that they're robust. That's how we know when we've got principles that are truly robust. Now, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute would have you believe that the way that they've observed what everyone else has observed is much more scientific than anyone else. And that's true. They're scientists and they do have lots of time to spend, digging a lot deeper and being a lot more scientific with their methodology. But when we're finding the same things, when the same observations are being made across these different environments through different methods, it kind of doesn't matter how scientific the approach is to find the same thing. I could get a chromatic scientist to come in and give you a really very deep scientific argument and analysis that would tell you that this is red. Or I could get your 3-year-old daughter to come in and point to this and say, what colour is it? And she'd say it's red. It doesn't really matter how we got to the answer, it's fucking red. We lent into the mythology of marketing. We didn't have these kind of robust principles to sort of underpin the work that we did. The work that we do. And so it's amazing now that we have these principles on which we can build a foundation of how we do our marketing that is one that will make our work more effective, right? And not only will it make our work more effective, it also allows us to explain to people why it's got more effective, right? You've done that and it's delivered a great result. Why? Well, we looked at this principle that's a robust principle from the marketing science and we applied it. For the first time in our lives, we look like we know what we're doing. Right? And that is awesome. That is great. That's a fantastic thing. But that's what's great about having these principles. What's dangerous about having these principles is that sometimes we apply them in too dogmatic, didactic, kind of narrow-minded way, right? We fall so in love with the logic, and we just do the logic again and again and again, over and over again, thinking that we can build a great brand and have great marketing success just by following this logic, which is very compelling. And we forget that true marketing greatness, true marketing effectiveness, the best outcomes are a combination of logic and magic. So Phil Jackson was a logic guy. He was a game plan guy. He was absolutely rigorous and an absolute kind of master of organizing the game, knowing what the set pieces were, knowing how everyone on that team was trained ad nauseum to understand how the game was going to be played, where was the ball going to move, where did you need to move, how was it going to get in the net, all of that kind of stuff, which is the logic and the process of the game. He was a real kind of master of that, and everyone on that team knew inside and out kind of how the game was going to go when it was run according to its plan. But Phil Jackson also knew that he had a team of stars, right? He had Jordan, he had Pippen, he had Horace Grant, he had John Paxson, he had all of these amazing players on his team. And they were the ones that were capable of producing magic. And so his whole approach was go out on the court and play like the stars you are. Play fluidly, play intuitively. Don't worry about kind of following the plan. Create the magic that only you can create. And then when the game starts to turn against us, as it inevitably does in sports, when the game starts to turn against us, we go back to that plan. We go back to those set pieces. We go back to that almost militaristic kind of adherence to the game plan, and that gets us out of trouble, right? That gets us out of trouble, and when the game turns back, we go back to playing fluidly. We go back to playing intuitively. We go back to creating the magic. And it's that combination of both the logic and the magic that made that team so great for so long. And I think we as marketers need to have the same appreciation of the necessity of the combination of the logic and the magic. When we want to win, we embrace risk. We manage it, sure, but we embrace risk and we go for the magic. We try and create an environment where the maximum amount of positive things, opportunities, magic can happen, right? And when we are wanting to not lose, we do the opposite. We try and avoid risk. We try and prevent bad things from happening. And as marketers, your job is not to prevent bad things from happening. It is to create an environment where the maximum amount of great things can happen. And so I guess that's my appeal to you, the cream of Australian marketing, is to embrace the logic and create room for the magic. Be the client that wants to win. Thank you.
I'd love to ask first up, Josh said at the start, marketing ROI is the hottest topic on everybody's mind. And in the context of understanding current demand and future demand, how do you think about communicating that in the context of demands of ROI and those sorts of messages in an organisation?
I think like anything, you can view ROI over a short term or over a long term. So usually when we talk about ROI in marketing, we've come to talk about it mostly as short-term ROI. So what can I see I immediately get back from the investment that I put in? And that is, of course, one way of looking at ROI. And if we're doing that part of our job that is about converting the existing demand in the market, that's absolutely the way to look at ROI. We should be looking at how much we spent and how much did we immediately get back. That's completely valid. If we're working with that audience for future demand, if we're building the brand, they're not in the market yet, so they're not going to show up in the sales figures next week. And so we can't measure the ROI of what we're doing in a short-term way. We have to think much more kind of broader, longer term, more holistically about what we're doing and say, what ROI do we want over 3 years from our total marketing spend? And do we want that to be, where do we want that to be? Do we want that to be about the same as what it is today? Because we can just keep doing our performance marketing and going round in circles for as long as we like, or would we like it to be more? And if we'd like it to be more, then starting to optimize for the long term and do things that are going to build the short-term ROI gradually over time is how we're going to get to a much bigger long-term ROI result, which is ultimately where we should be aiming.
So it's one of the things I think is really interesting whenever we talk about effectiveness is synergies, right? Because one of the things we see consistently in econometrics is, like, to your point, differentiation fuels advertising effectiveness, and advertising effectiveness, to a degree fuels differentiation. How much do you think the synergistic effects and things like that of, say, an effective product, an effective price point, effective distribution, and the real 4 Ps of the conversation are overlooked in that argument? Because, we see across the market, if someone's price point drops, their marketing effectiveness drops. If you advertise with the worst price point, the worst product in the market, it doesn't matter what you do. How much do you see that playing into an effectiveness debate, and how people think about, their effectiveness conversations internally in an organisation? Because I think increasingly we've seen that 4 Ps move away from marketing to a degree. I'm curious to know what you think about that and how you think about that conversation.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is that many other things impact on the potential effectiveness of advertising, apart from the advertising itself, right? And I'd say that's absolutely kind of true. And when we're, some of us probably work for companies where the fundamentals within that organisation allow us to very easily sort of do great work and benefit from the results, and others of us, I'm sure, work in organisations where that's a little bit difficult, or the behaviour of the organisation perhaps sometimes undermines what we say in the marketing. And I think, like, trying to pull those things apart. I mean, one thing that I've learned working with startup companies for a long time now is companies they don't become successful, valuable companies because they do one thing well. Right? And I remember thinking about this, probably when I started in advertising, looking at Apple. Apple didn't do one thing well, they did everything well, right? And that's what builds great companies. They get everything right.
How much do you think creativity is a force multiplier? Because, we see standard deviations of maybe 400%. In terms of the ROI it can generate. But what do you see and you would have seen this through tracksuit and kind of the future demand context as well?
Yeah, so I think you're right. There's an area which creativity is less important. And so if we're converting existing demand, if we're talking to an audience that is in the market and ready to buy something, they're actually naturally drawn towards information that's going to help them make a purchase decision, right? We don't need to earn our way into their attention. They're actually naturally looking for that information. If we're talking to people who are not interested in buying from the category but will be later, they're not interested in that information. We've all got enough going on in our heads, right? We're not going to sit down and pay attention to marketing from a category or a brand that we're just not interested in buying from right now, unless it's creative enough to earn our attention. And so that is one of the biggest requirements of building future demand effectively is creativity and also emotion. Creativity because we need to do things that people who aren't in the market view as worthy of kind of engaging with, which isn't going to be a bunch of product information and price information. It's going to be something creative. And emotion because we want to leave them with a positive feeling that they remember when they come back into the category. And Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.